What's up, boys? Happy to see you guys again for another episode of The Blind Pig, courtesy of BGObsession.com. I am coming to you remotely from the sunny beaches of South Carolina, but I couldn't miss this one. I wanted to get together with you guys and talk about a couple things. But before we do that, we'll get some particulars out of the way. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like and a share and a follow. Or if you're listening to the audio podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, you also can listen to the audio podcast on all major audio platforms. And of course, come by bgobsession.com, join the board. We just added a new member yesterday, somebody who didn't even know that we existed until a couple days ago. So I was happy to see that. So the more the merrier, join up. And of course, give us a like, share, follow, and on to the show. First thing I figured we talk about last week, we record these things on Wednesday nights to be released late Wednesday night, and then usually kind of hitting stride Thursday morning. Not long after the morning rush and the Thursday morning, it was announced that Darrell Green's number is officially going to get retired, number 28. I personally, he was one of my favorite players growing up. I made the trek to Canton to see him and Art Monk get inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He was always somebody that you rooted for on the field. You know, I fully understand that there's a level of personality beyond of him outside of the off the field that a lot of people didn't might have gotten rubbed the wrong way with. I personally have run into that with him where I've seen him out and about. He's actually come into my auto parts store and I he didn't want to be bothered. He wasn't a total jerk or anything, but it was just kind of standoffish. But as far as a football player goes, the guy is one of the best players to ever wear our jersey. I don't know that in a league where passing actually just was really getting going. I mean, there was throwing, but not like there was into the '80s. That dude stepped up and would literally go to the defensive coordinator and go to the coaches and say, "No, you worry about over there. I got this over here." And it opened up opportunities to play other guys and double team other guys because he was a true shutdown corner. You didn't throw it towards him because if you did, he was going to make a play. And if he got the ball in his hand, he was as explosive as anybody on the field, offensive or defensive. So just wanted to
Yeah,
hear your guys' remarks about 28 officially going to be retired and no longer available.
well, I'm an old guy, so I grew up, that was my era. He was the star, he was the Sean Taylor of my era, that you could always count on to like make a play when it absolutely needed to be played. And I mean, there's a lot of iconic. If you haven't seen a lot of Darrell Green, go out there on YouTube and you'll see a lot of those plays where he intercepts a pass and hurdles a guy and scores the clinching touchdown. Or so he was one of the heroes when I was growing up, as far as the Redskins go. And but I think the one thing I wanted to make a comment about is not so much Darrell Green getting his number retired, but more just the fact that one of the things that came out at the end of the Snyder era was how disenfranchised veteran former players felt and how there wasn't a lot of, not that they made no effort. I think it would be unfair to say that like Snyder and company made no effort to include veterans and legacy players, but they did. But it was always with some lukewarm response, right? And or it just never, you never got the feeling that those guys were thrilled to come back or wanted to
Or
have anything to do with Dan Snyder publicly. And I think
Mhm.
that was one of the things I heard Green talk about is how good it is to want to come back and to
Mhm.
want to like be honored by that organization now that it's not run by the evil empire and a bunch of buffoons, self-serving buffoons. So that's really what I honed in on is it's an indication of two things. One, that the new regime understands that it's really important to celebrate the history and to do it the right way, and also the fact that the players feel like it's genuine. And clearly,
Mhm.
Darrell Green's not a guy that's like bending over back pining to come back and to be, you know, I think he would have been just as fine just to say I'm done with that. That was I played in the past, and I don't want everything to do with him going forward. But they've clearly been able to get him on board with, look, it's going to be different now, and you can trust us, and we value you, and all that good stuff. So,
Well, and to that point, the old tit fan legacy players, it was always with an attached agenda.
Yeah.
Charles Mann was on the radio and had a story that I heard, and I was just in awe because you mentioned Dan Snyder. He was supposed to be the fan, you know what I mean? He was the guy that grew up with the team, and he was the guy that was supposed to get it. But then, Charles Mann was on the radio and he said, I played 1 year in San Francisco, and if I ever call their front office and say, hey, I want to come to the game, they'll just literally say, how many tickets and where? There's no question about it. Meanwhile, in Washington, if you want to do that, yeah, but you got to buy your ticket. Or they'll offer you to be in a suite. And if you're in the suite, usually you're in the suite with season ticket holders and VIP members. So you're not even watching football at that point. You're glorified, publicity
Ambassador.
right.
stunt.
Yeah.
So um I said early on, what we've had talks about the new regime. I said that I really hope that they get back involved with the alumni and they reconnect, because that is something that we have sorely missed. And I have just been utterly impressed at how well they've done it, with the urgency that they've done it. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the announcement, and if you haven't out there, it is freaking awesome. Where they tricked Daryl Green, he's reading
Hmm.
pre-draft recorded vision, and then they said, "All right, we want to do one more take, but let's do it. We're going to do a little alternative ending." So they starts reading the teleprompter, and then he goes into, if you do come to work and do this and that, then you can have your number retired, like the next one, number 20, and then he loses it, which was just awesome to see. And then they come around the corner, and there's this brand new mural of him on the wall in full Redskin gear, by the way. I just want to point that out. But there's no logo shaming in Commander's Park right now, of him just laying out somebody with the Rams, and the big quote, "I will arrive violently," and it was just awesome. And everybody's wearing their 28 jerseys. Dan Quinn and everybody put on Daryl Green jerseys and stuff. So it was just really cool how they did it. It's really cool that they did it. I'm excited that they're finally like, they see it. You know what I mean? They get it. And this one thing, like, not to sound terrible, this one thing was executed better than anything to do with a former player has been in the last 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the you just hit on all the points I was going to make, Derek. I felt like this was done about as perfectly as it could be done. They picked a way to do it where the world was focused on the NFL, but did it without taking away from the event that the world was focused on. They gave Daryl his moment. It was brilliant. I love the fact that, John, you've been talking for months about how involved Harris is. I love the fact that Harris was involved, but he was involved remotely. He had a call with Daryl remotely, and they taped it, and you could see it. Harris is working from his office. He's doing his thing. And instead of Harris being front and center, you've got the brand new general manager, the brand new head coach, and a couple of the minority owners that you don't always see all the time. And guys that aren't, granted, they should be tied to the burgundy and gold now. I mean, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters are running the organization, so they should absolutely be tied to the burgundy and gold, but they have no history with the Redskin moniker. And here they are in Redskin gear, um, all in honor of a guy that never worked for them, never played with them. They have no real history with, but you could see the respect. And I just felt like the entire thing was orchestrated with, quite frankly, you may laugh at this, John, military precision. The whole thing was done perfectly. And we haven't been able to say that about anything with this organization well, all right, the last few months have actually been pretty good. I shouldn't say that, because, since the end of the season, this organization's done a pretty good job of all of it, I think. But this was just one more example of, we want to honor one of our own. How do we go about doing it? And they did it without stepping on anybody's toes, and they did it at the right moment. And I'm in awe of how good we are so lucky at the moment. I can't even begin to describe it.
I thought it was cool too, the way they did it on the eve of the draft, which you mentioned it could have been a distraction, but then they pulled him into being a part of the draft, and so he got to actually show how excited he was, and I thought that was cool. And it gave us the chance to highlight to all of the people watching the draft that this is what Washington's doing for one of their greatest players of all time. You know, it kind of became an NFL celebration, not just a Washington celebration. So that was
Yeah.
So on to the draft. There was a couple things I wanted to point before we don't really need to hit the nuts and bolts. I'm just kind of curious about what you guys were feeling in the moment. I kind of know because we were running chat all weekend long, and then how you guys are feeling now that we're 4 days removed from the end of the draft. The first big thing I want to touch on is we actually traded with the Eagles, which, in my personal opinion, has always been a no-no. You don't ever.
Yeah.
You almost go out of your way to say, if they were to call you to tell them, hey, if you weren't the Eagles or if you weren't the Cowboys or if you weren't the Giants, I might consider this trade, but because of who you are, you can just never call me again. But I know that's not how the world works.
Kind of like your ex. Lose my number.
Right.
And they
So,
probably did it full well knowing that the fan base was screaming for us to take the cornerback. They probably did it full well knowing that the Eagles were going to take that cornerback. And the only thing I would point out about that, I didn't like it at first pass for that reason, that you might be possibly helping the Eagles, who also reportedly had a really great draft. But the one thing I would point out is we don't know where DeJean or whatever his name was, the corner that the Eagles took. We don't know how they had him rated. They may have had he may have been the fifth best corner on the Washington board. So I think without the context of knowing like how they viewed that possibility and who else was there that the Eagles might take, you can't really judge it whether it was a good decision or not.
right. And obviously, it's going to be hard to judge anything at this point. You need at least 3 years before we can say it was a positive draft or a negative draft. Coming out of the 2020 draft, we had our feelings. We weren't sure, and now none of those guys are actually even on the roster anymore. So it's hard to really break it down. What I will say though is the return. We gave up 40, 78, and 152. We got back 50, 53, and 161. So I don't know how that works on the Jimmy Johnson scale or whatever, but I mean, that screams to me when you walk out of the building or when you walk away from a trade like that and you've added 2 third-round picks
Especially in a draft where a lot of the experts are saying
or
after the
2
fourth
second-round
round,
picks.
the talent kind of tanks off the cliff. And
Right.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that was kind of what was put out there a lot by draft experts, is that after the first four rounds, it's not as big as deep a draft as what we're used to.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I was
essentially you move. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I was just gonna say I was a little, I mean, you asked for our draft darling a couple of weeks ago, Derek, and Cooper DeJean was mine, and I said I'd be following his career and I'd be rooting for him unless he got picked by the Eagles. And I'm just crushed. I'm absolutely crushed. I mean, I looked at that and I thought, we could have the equivalent of 2 first-round draft picks in the second round. I mean, after taking Newton, my thought process was DeJean still on the board. We could have what the experts said were, 3 guys who were first-round draft picks in Daniels, Newton, and DeJean. And then we traded that pick, and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. I'm not unhappy with what we got back, but man, I'm gonna hate seeing that kid twice a year.
Before we move on talking about some of the other players that they drafted, I just wanted to throw it out there. The mock draft that we ran the previous week, it was very close to what actually happened, because for those that didn't listen to that podcast, all just a ton of tackles were taken before we made the number 36 pick in the mock draft. And we were kind of faced with the quandary of do we reach and take the best tackle available, at 36, or do we forego that and try to get the best player, knowing that some really great players would, by definition, have to drop right when there's a run on tackles. And that's exactly what happened in the real draft. And I was glad. I might have been a little queasy when we traded number 40, because it was clear that that we weren't determined to get a tackle, but in the first couple picks. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting that it played out very similar to what we felt like was a worst case scenario when we did our mock draft. But they did kind of the same thing we did, which is who's the best guy on the board that, setting aside what we fans feel we need. And I know that was probably the initial flush was a lot of criticism that we didn't draft a tackle in the first 3 picks. But I know we're going to talk about Mr. Coleman in a few minutes here, but I think that they did an amazing job getting Newton there. And, I think if he doesn't fracture his foot last season, he's probably a top 10, top 15 pick in the draft.
Well,
and
according to everything I saw, he should have been a top 10 or 15 pick now.
Yeah. Anyway.
Probably.
And I think you can probably chalk that up to the tackle run. Him
and
dropping
the quarterback
that far.
run, a record 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks.
Yeah, I mean, between
crazy.
tackles and quarterbacks, you're talking about nearly half of the first round right there. You throw wide receivers in there, and you've got, I don't know, 3/5 of the first round, all in just those 3 positions. It was pretty crazy. I was just surprised that don't get me wrong, Newton is tremendous. I believe Newton is tremendous value where we got him. I was just surprised that we leaned into the strength of the team with as many holes as we already have. And I've seen a lot of speculation that means that, we could potentially move John Allen. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think you're going to see Dan Quinn want to move John Allen or Daron Payne. I think you're going to see Dan Quinn look at this and figure out, how do I use these 3 guys together?
I thought a cool thing, Bob, was Peters was asked about that. And he said, I turned to Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and said, can we make this work? Like, we can't believe he's sitting here, but can we really make this work with the assets we already have? And they said, hell yeah, we'll figure out how to make it work. So I love that was like a collaboration there.
I've already seen some guys speculate that we could start seeing some 3-4 with all 3 of those guys. Allen playing some nose and Payne and Newton playing your DEs with oh my gosh. Now one of the new guys, the guy we got from Carolina, Luvu.
Oh yeah.
And Davis on the outside edges. I'm just kind of, I don't know, a little excited.
Well, I was thinking more along the lines of run a 5-2-4 if you can find the opportunity to have 5 linemen, and you can flex that out, and then he could be one of the 3 down interior linemen, and then you can rotate linebackers, outside linebackers, and edge defenders on the outside, whether they're standing up or hand in the dirt. You could run all kinds of 5-1-5, some really but some really exotic looks that can set you up to be successful.
So we took Mike Sanristel, who I'll admit I don't recall us talking about him. I didn't know the name when I just didn't focus that much on corners. But I thought, a couple things. Nick Saban, not that Nick Saban's always right, but Nick Saban, I saw an interview where he said that Sanristel is probably one of the best players in the entire draft, in his opinion. And then the other thing that I think is cool, because we went and did it again a few picks later, he's a converted position. He was not a cornerback. He was a wide receiver, I believe, which to me, that's a really cool thing for a cornerback, because if you can play wide receiver, I mean, I don't know what better insight there is into what your opposition is going to do when you played that position yourself.
Yeah.
What better prep there could be for a corner. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. And then I want to talk about Sinnott, who we need to get that down, because I've been calling him Sanat for 3 days, but apparently it's been Sinnott. I am so excited about the Kansas State tight end, because I don't know. You guys tell me, when's the last time we had a tight end that could catch the ball, like loved to block, could move, was that athletic. I don't know who that would be. I know who everyone's going to say, but I just think Senate. I know everyone's going to say Chris Cooley, but I mean, and
I
I'm
would
not dissing
argue
Chris Cooley, but this
I would
guy is
argue that's
a
more
star.
Mike Sellers, and it just might be a debate of position grouping that he's added to. Mike Sellers was that guy, and he was as good of a receiving fullback as I've ever seen in my life.
I think Senate plays like a fullback in some ways. I mean, I think
Well, right before we move on there, I do want to say to Sammer still, I did take some notes on him. I'm excited about him a little bit because I think it means we can move Quan Martin back to safety now that we actually ended up losing Cam Curl to free agency. Um, and then you can use Jeremy Chin as like a you know a guy that can be a hybrid linebacker because I'm pretty sure Sanders still is going to be a slot guy. I do not think they're going to use him on the outside. One note that I put on here, quote, I will arrive violently. I mean, I don't know if you guys watched this tape. He's 5'9", 182. He plays way above his weight class. I mean, he's hitting running backs in tight ends like he's hitting wide receivers in much smaller players. So I like his game quite a bit.
Well, and we're
so.
back to that turnover thing, right? I mean, the dude seems to be his senior year, he had 6 INTs and 2 forced fumbles. He's not playing around. He's looking for the football. And that strikes me very much as Quinn and Witt, right? I mean, just think about what they did in Dallas last year, and pretty much everything Witt said when in his introductory press conference was about taking the football away.
So one golden thread that runs through this draft as we talk through the rest of these guys. I don't know if you guys heard this, but I heard it in several press conferences. I heard Peter say it. I heard the other, I still don't have his name down. I apologize. The other VP,
Lance
Lance,
Newmark.
Newmark talked about it. They use this term commander's tag. And you guys know I hate the freaking name. I'm not going to, so I hate them using the commanders in any reference. However, what they were talking about is they said, this, oh, yeah, we put the commander's tag on him. So they've clearly kind of defined what we've been talking about a little bit loosely for a couple of months now, which is, the very first press conferences we heard from those guys, they were talking about what they want, like what identity are the team they want to have and what kind of players they want. So I just wrote down some things that I think apply to all of these draftees that I think were kind of the definitions behind the commander tag when they use that term. And that is leadership, because almost every damn guy that we drafted was a team captain.
Mm-hmm.
Toughness, athleticism. We've heard a lot about the RAS scores on these guys. Like we have like a historically high. I think we probably have, according to the RAS scoring, we have the most athletic draft class of any team in the NFL. And being explosive/violent. Those were the 4 things I wrote down. I don't know that that's how they define that commander tag, but I suspect that almost, if not every one of the guys they drafted, they had pre-tagged as this is the guy we got to get if we can get him, because he has these qualities. And those were the qualities that I think they were looking for. Anyway. And I think Senate is one of those guys.
Absolutely.
Tough as
I got notes here on Senate too. I went back and I looked. He ran a 4.68 40, which ain't exactly slow regarding a guy who's 6'4", 250. Shuttle in 10 yard, he's an 80 plus percentile. Vert, broad jump, 3-cone, 90 plus percentile. So the guy is explosive in short area quickness and burst. And when he runs, it's fluid. I don't know if you noticed that, John. He does not look like he's rumbling, stumbling, bumbling. You know what I mean? Like the old school tight ends. He is running fluid. Just in the highlight package I watched, he was lined up outside in a trips bunch package in the backfield as a fullback. He ran routes or blocked out of both of the out of that alignment. He caught a screen. He played tight slot right on the hip of the tackle. Played traditional tight end with his hand in the dirt, and that was only in one highlight package. So the guy can play all positions of tight end that you ask him to, as far as a receiver goes. And that was just the 4 minutes. You know what I mean? He was all over the place. So I was
Yeah,
impressed by him. I loved watching him. I most places had him rated later than the third round, but you know what? We got him. I'm good with it. I'll run with it. I'll take their word for it.
So at 67, we got probably one of the most intriguing guys in the draft, and that's Brandon Coleman, who I don't think anyone would have projected that if we were going to find a left tackle, it would be at pick 67. We all would have groaned and rolled our eyes. But Brandon Coleman is another one of these monster guys. He had a 9.98 on the RAS. I think that's compared to guards for some reason. They're everyone. That's one thing. That's like an NFL draft profile thing now, right? Unless you're a gigantic man with all the measurables, they just want to shove you into the guard slot because nobody wants to call him a tackle, and then 2 years later he doesn't succeed at that, and it makes it
The
look bad.
Brandon Sheriff syndrome.
Right. But obviously the team sees him as a tackle. And I've heard a lot more talk since we picked him about, I mean, he had over 1,000 pass plays in college and he gave up 3 sacks. I mean, he's not like a borderline guy. The guy can play tackle. It's just a matter of whether he is the guy that they think he is, I think in the end. But that's pretty exciting if he works out to be, a really good left tackle. To get that kind of a player with our 5th pick in a draft is insane. So it's pretty exciting.
I put on YouTube earlier today while I was working, and I just let videos run. And Hoffman and Paulson came up, and they were talking about Coleman. And Paulson actually sounded a little apologetic. He's like, I had him slotted in as a guard just like everybody else did. He said, I thought this guy was a guard. And after Adam Peters was so definitive about we drafted him as a tackle, he said, I went back and looked at him, and he said, you know what? He looks more tackle-like than Sam Cosmi ever looked. He said, in fact, it's a little embarrassing that I did not see it when I watched him at the Senior Bowl. He said the guy was just manhandling people, and he's playing as a tackle against defensive ends, and he was just absolutely manhandling people. And he said, and for whatever reason, I had it in my head this guy was going to be a guard in the NFL, and so I was watching him like a guard, not like a tackle. And he said, so I went back and I tried looking at the tape like I'm Adam Peters. And he said, you know what? I'm not sure this isn't going to work. And he said, that's not just me being excited because the team thinks this. He said, we've all witnessed a lot of this guy can do XYZ here in Washington, and then the guy can't do XYZ. He said, we got a real football player, and he does a great job of setting the edge. You watch him. He started using a bunch of things that I've never actually looked for. He's like, you watch where his head is, and it's always dead center on the line of the guy in front of him. He never gets overextended. He said, are his arms a little shorter than you want to tackle? Yeah. And he said, maybe that's why I was thinking guard, but the punch is right on time. He said, everything is exactly where you want it to be. And he said, I'm beginning to feel like maybe this could work. So for what that's worth. Granted, Logan misses sometimes too, but he knows more than I do.
So we can hit a little quicker because I think we've touched the guys that I personally believe are going to be made. And obviously, look, we didn't even talk about Jaden Daniels because I don't know that we could even touch more on that. Jaden Daniels is now our starting quarterback. I don't think our concerns changed at all. I don't think our excitement changed at all. So for what it's worth,
Derek, I think the only thing that's worthy of noting is from what we're hearing, it was never going to be May.
right?
I thought that was interesting because I think in our minds it was in most people's minds it was like a coin toss, but it was really down to Jaden Daniels or McCarthy, and it was never really in doubt. I don't think, even having said that, it was there was just some discussion about McCarthy, but sounds like that made me feel better. I don't know if you guys felt this way, but I felt like if they're wrong about Daniels, they're wrong with conviction, and they believe he's the guy. And I think the only other thing I want to say about Jaden Daniels is I was really pleased with just the general vibe I got from him at the draft and after the draft. The things that he said were there was no diva language of any kind. It was all about the team and proving that he deserves the job and the draft position that he got. And I mean, to me, you could not have scripted what he said to be better, more what I wanted to hear than what it was. So I was excited about that.
Mm-hmm. So, couple fifth rounders. Jordan McGee out of Temple, linebacker, 6'1", 228, ran a 4.55. Has extensive experience on special teams. Again, back to your thing, John, 2-time team captain, 3-year starter. He led the team in tackles 2 times with 86 and 80 over the last 2 seasons. NFL scout says lacks ideal size, but plays with good strength and aggression. Again, who does that sound like? That was on NFL.com. And he's a local boy, born in Towson, Maryland. And then the other fifth rounder by way of Philly, Dominique Hampton, safety out of Washington, big boy at 6'2", 215. Played 6 years at Washington. He started the last 2, and he led the team in tackles in 2023. 2021, he was voted most outstanding special teams player at Washington. So I think these are going to be 2 depth guys based on what we did in the offseason. I don't see McGee pushing for immediate starting time at all because Lavu is probably your planned long-term starter at middle linebacker. Wagner's going to be the short-term, and then we'll see where that evolves. And Davis is going into the final year of his contract. And Hampton is probably entering a really crowded safety room now that you think about it. Derek Force is coming back, Quan Martin, Percy Butler, Jeremy Chin, who we signed in the offseason, and Jeremy Reeves, who we brought back on a deal out of free agency, who is a special team stalwart and team captain and all pro and all of those other things. So,
although with one thing about Hampton, he's got to be pretty excited because all those guys you referenced, or most of them were not. Those are not this regime's guys. They're
true.
on the roster, but we don't know if they love, those guys or they don't love them.
Yeah.
So that's just something to keep in mind.
I think Percy Butler is on notice.
Butler, it was the one that jumped in my head too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just my personal opinion. I saw that pick and I thought, if I'm Percy Butler today, I'm feeling the heat underneath my seat.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. I think Reeves is although this kid's a special teams guy, says the linebacker. These may be competition for Reeves, but Reeves just seems like the kind of guy that's going to rise to meet the challenge, and all it's going to do is make everybody better around him. But yeah, I think Butler might be in trouble.
And we didn't even talk about Luke McCaffrey, who was the second guy that
yeah, you're right. I missed McCaffrey. He
is a converted quarterback who's I thought that was that could be a pick that looks, well, it could go one of 2 ways, obviously. Here's some real insight. It could go one of 2 ways, badly or well.
Hey, John,
pretty much what I'm going to say.
You just qualified to be a national media correspondent, man. You should get a Twitter account.
I think it's a risky pick because you worry about, well, how much did the name have to do with it and the family legacy?
Well, not only that, how much did Peter's relationship with Christian have to do with it?
Right. But we've seen it before where, sometimes there's good gene lines and.
Well, they're both the family.
Right. Family traditions and that pressure of, doing as well as my brother did. And
the Watt family, there are 2, the Diggs family. I mean, there's multiple families right now that are just all over the place in the league.
What I love is that he had a really good final season, and which I think that was only his second season at the position. So you've got to feel like we know he's a really great athlete just from the measurables, but just the learning ceiling that's there, where one would think he's only going to get better and better. That's a pretty exciting pick to me because I think he's he looks like an ideal slot wide receiver for us.
And
And
I don't know if you guys saw the short interview with him that the Commanders posted on YouTube. Um, but I mean, all he did was talk about the respect that he has for Adam Peters, and I'll tell you what I got out of it was there's a tremendous amount of desire to not disappoint in this kid. He doesn't want to disappoint Adam Peters. A friend of the family picked him, and he now feels some type of responsibility to live up to that. And if he's anything like his dad and his brother, good and well, he's going to pull out all the stops to make that happen.
And
If
I saw the clip, Bob, where he's walking down the hallway. He just got off the phone and he looks at his whole family that's assembled there and says, Commanders. And he says it with obviously some emotion in his voice, like
Mhm.
where he hoped he was going to go. So that gave me goosebumps, man, because it's been a long time since we heard any player drafted to Washington sound like they were incredibly excited about it. It just
mhm.
really hasn't been
So
seen a lot of.
I like it. And the other thing, you said he was converted. He wasn't only converted; he converted in college. You know what I mean? A lot of times you hear a conversion going quarterback to wide receiver going into school. No, he started at Nebraska as a quarterback, and
Mhm.
then he ended up converting to wide receiver. 6'2", 198. He ran a 4.46. I like his feet, quick feet. He's a little bendy on his route running. But to your point, John, trend with room to grow up. He is trending up at this point because he probably is only scratching the surfaces
And
of his ability as a wide receiver.
something that jumped out at me, I think I did the thread introducing him. His three cone and shuttle times are
Is
like
freaky.
90 are like 90th percentile. So
Hmm
he doesn't have that straight line speed. I mean, he's still pretty
I mean,
fast.
4.46 ain't exactly slouching.
Right. But as far as like lateral quickness, he's going to be able to get open in a
Hmm
lot in the NFL, I think. So
Well, and I saw an interview with Christian McCaffrey, and I think it was during the playoffs this last year, and they asked him about his work ethic and what he did to become the receiver that he is, and he talked about spending hours running the wide receiver route trees, working on the wide receiver route trees in high school and college. And if this kid is anything like his older brother at all, good and well he's doing exactly the same thing. And he's got a great teacher in his dad, and obviously a tremendous asset in his older brother. I'm honestly, he's one of the most exciting picks in a draft that's pretty damned exciting. I mean, I kind of already have him penciled in that slot position,
hmm
with Dotson on the outside on one end and McLaurin on the outside on the other, and then you throw Sennett in there and Robinson, and it's starting to get a little scary. And maybe Daniels doesn't have to run at all.
hmm
well, we drafted four offensive players, right? All four of them there's a lot to be excited about. All
hmm
four of them.
So the last pick was Javante Jean Baptiste, defensive end, Notre Dame. This guy's a physical specimen, 6'5", 239. He's got 33 and 3/4 inch arms, and he ran a 4.6, 640. The other thing is his broad jump was 127 inches, which was 97th percentile of defensive ends. So he can blow off the ball pretty quick. I'm not expecting him to be a day one contributor, but I think this guy could be kind of a rotational piece. We added 3 defensive ends in the during the offseason, expecting them to be, full-time contributors. We moved on from knucklehead gambler Shaka Tony.
Shaka.
So that was a spot that we're gonna have to. But somebody we were talking on the podcast before that you wonder what these other moves mean. Does Jamin Davis become kind of that X factor edge defender guy when you need a big play and stuff like that? And Lavu has some experience doing that and some other things. So I don't see Baptiste having a role yet. I think he probably competes for a practice squad spot or to make the final 53. But he's another interesting one. I would like to point out Paul talked about Baptiste in our breakdowns. John talked about Sanat. I talked about Brandon Coleman. Bob, did
Somebody
you talk
talked
about
Luke
Cooper DeJean? Huh?
Yeah, I did. Well, no, I brought him up, but I didn't actually talk about him much because I didn't think we'd have a chance to draft him. I
Right.
honestly thought he'd go between 20 and 30.
Right.
But somebody talked about Luke McCaffrey, didn't they? I thought Luke McCaffrey was part of our breakdown for wide receivers.
I don't think there was any real time. I'd have to go back and look. I don't think it was a major focus, but his name
Okay.
may have been brought up as part of the legacy because I talked about Brendan Rice. But the last thing I want to do before we sign off here is run through these picks. How many starters did we just add? I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Obviously, Daniels is one. He's starting quarterback, right? We're just gonna pencil him in. Second round pick.
I'm going to say something insane. Are you talking about opening day starters or starting in the first season?
Well, that's kind of the conversation because I think some of these guys are like, I would say probably 5 or 6 of them could end up being major contributors.
I think 6 of these guys could be starters by the end of the season.
Well, I don't think Newton's going to be a starter, but the guy's going to be a major contributor.
Oh yeah,
I
right?
would
okay.
I would say 2 opening days, 2 maybe 3 opening day starters.
Coleman, Daniels,
And McCaffrey.
okay, as a slot though.
And Sinestri, the only reason I don't say Sinestri is because it all depends on whether or not we start with three cornerbacks.
Right.
Right. I mean, and we
Well,
have no idea what we're going to see for defense. So
Sanat is another one that I don't think he's a day one starter, but by week 6, 7, 8, 9, he's going to be.
I think Sennett's absolutely going to
Sinnott.
be a one starter.
You
Do
think
you?
so?
You
You
don't-
think he'll pass
I think
Ertz?
yeah, I think
Oh
it'll be
yeah, I
Ertz
forgot
early.
about it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it'll be Ertz early, but I think by the end of the season we may start to see the rookie. That's not a bad call.
So
So
I want to mention one last thing. I know that was our last thing, but how crazy was it? I did a thread on Sunday evening about draft grades, and I could not believe I was hard pressed to find anyone who gave us less than an A of
Yeah.
some kind. In fact, I think I looked at 10 different draft assessments, and it was one. There was one, like I think maybe Walter Football gave us a B plus or something.
those
But
fuckers.
anyway, the NFL's next gen stats rated us with the top draft in the NFL in 2024, which blew my mind. And then the other one that I heard Galdi talking about was there's a draft GPA that somebody out there does every year where they look at like the 20 top draft grade sources, and they have some kind of an algorithm where they figure out assigned points, etc. And we were number 4 in the NFL. The bad news was Philly was number 3 on that same list.
Yeah, but does the number of picks take a play into that? Because they also set a record or tied a record with 8 trades on draft day or over the course of the 3 days.
I don't know how it's calculated. But I did see a lot of praise for Philly. And we never know. Galdi pointed out that in 2019 we were 4th rated as well. And that didn't work out so well. So you never know, but I do think it's just a rarity where we're getting universal praise for the way that the draft was conducted. And I also think the fact that, I mean, these guys came in pretty late. So for them to have the kind of draft that we think we might have just had, when really they were behind the curve from the get-go because the sale took so long, and then we had to go through the GM hire and the head coaching hire, it's pretty freaking impressive that they seem to have had it nailed, as far as getting guys that they feel really confident about. I think that's really impressive.
All right, gentlemen. One more thing. Raise hail, the new slogan of the team, hashtag raise hail. And then as we finish up, of course, you guys, thanks for hanging with us on YouTube. Like and share. Please give us a follow. Subscribe, all of that stuff. Or you can find us on all major audio platforms, Apple, all of them, under BGO Blind Pick. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. It's been a pleasure, fellas.
Thanks, guys.
Later.